There are cats that are graceful, cats that are mysterious, cats that make you feel like they own the house and you're just paying rent. And then, there's a Pallas's cat. If you've never seen one before, imagine someone took a regular cat and then just left it in the dryer a little too long. Round face, flat nose, fur so thick and wild it looks like it got into an argument with a snowstorm and refused to back down. And the expression? Permanently, deeply, cosmically annoyed, like it just found out the Wi-Fi went down and it's somehow your fault. Now, what happens when one of these ancient, wild, gloriously grumpy little creatures ends up living with a human family? We're about to find out. The Miller family didn't plan for any of this. James and Carol Miller run a small wildlife education center in rural Montana, the kind of place where injured foxes recover in the back room, and the dinner table conversation usually involves questions like, did someone remember to feed the hawk? They'd had plenty of animals pass through over the years, but nothing had prepared them for Pushkin. Pushkin arrived as a tiny fist-sized kitten, rescued from a wildlife facility that had closed unexpectedly. He was approximately 8 weeks old, weighed about as much as a granola bar, and already looked like he was filing a formal complaint with management. Carol took one look at him and said, "Oh, he's going to be trouble." She had no idea. The first sign came on day 3. Pushkin had been exploring the living room, slowly, deliberately, like a very small detective investigating a very serious crime scene. When he rounded the corner of the bookshelf and came face to face with the hallway mirror, he stopped. The other cat stopped. Pushkin narrowed his eyes. The other cat narrowed its eyes right back. Now, most kittens discover mirrors and either lose interest or start pawing at the glass. Pushkin was not most kittens. Pushkin took this as a personal challenge. He puffed up, which, given how fluffy he already was, essentially doubled his size. He let out a sound that can only be described as a tiny warrior's battle cry, somewhere between a hiss and a squeak, and launched himself directly at his own reflection. He bounced off the mirror, somersaulted backward, and landed flat on his back on the hallway rug. There was a long pause. He looked up at the ceiling. The ceiling offered no comfort. Carol, watching from the kitchen doorway, pressed her hand over her mouth. James, coming in from the back room, said, "What did I miss?" And Carol couldn't even answer because she was laughing too hard. Pushkin stood up, smoothed his fur, walked away with the dignity of someone who absolutely meant to do that. By week 2, Pushkin had developed opinions about everything. The couch, acceptable, but only the left cushion. The food bowl, adequate, but the water dish needed to be moved approximately 3 inches to the right. The dog, Biscuit, a gentle yellow lab who had lived peacefully in this house for 6 years, deeply, fundamentally suspicious. But the thing Pushkin loved most, or at least the thing that consumed the most of his time and energy, was hunting. Or rather, attempting to hunt. One afternoon, Carol left a small toy mouse on the kitchen floor, the kind with a little feather tail. Nothing special. Pushkin found it. What followed was 10 full minutes of the most intense, focused, methodical stalking you have ever seen. Low to the ground, ears flat, eyes locked, moving one paw at a time with the patience of a creature who has all the time in the world and intends to use every second of it. He inched forward, and forward, and forward, and then, at the moment of maximum commitment, full launch, full speed, claws out, he attacked Carol's slipper, which had been sitting, completely motionless, 6 inches to the left of the toy mouse the entire time. The toy mouse remained untouched. Pushkin sat on top of the slipper and looked around the room as if checking whether anyone had witnessed that. Carol had. She was already reaching for her phone. That video now has 400,000 views, but here's where things took a turn nobody expected. In early spring, Carol's daughter Emma came to stay for a few months, along with her 8-month-old son Theo. Theo had just learned to crawl. The morning Theo first made his way across the living room floor, chunky little hands slapping the hardwood, big curious eyes taking in everything. Pushkin was on the couch, half asleep, doing what Pallas's cats do best, looking ancient and vaguely judgmental. He heard the sound. He opened one eye. He saw Theo, and then Pushkin did something none of them had ever seen him do before. He stood up, slowly, fully upright on his back legs, and stared. Not with suspicion, not with annoyance, with something that looked impossibly like recognition. James saw it from across the room. He nudged Carol. They both went quiet. Theo kept crawling. Pushkin kept watching. And then, carefully, quietly, one slow paw at a time, Pushkin climbed down from the couch and began to follow. Not chasing, not hunting, following. And from that morning on, everywhere Theo went, Pushkin was right behind him. The family thought it was cute, a little phase, something the cat would lose interest in after a day or two, but a week passed, then two, and Pushkin never stopped. Emma started to notice something else too, something she couldn't quite explain. Whenever Theo got too close to the edge of something, the coffee table, the bottom of the stairs, the kitchen door, Pushkin would appear, instantly, like he'd been waiting just out of sight. And he would sit himself directly between Theo and whatever the danger was. Nobody taught him that. Nobody asked him to do it. So the question nobody in that house could quite answer was this: what exactly did this wild little cat think Theo was? There's a moment every parent knows. The moment you realize your child has found their person, their safe place, the one presence in the room that makes everything feel okay. For Theo, that presence had round ears, a permanently grumpy face, and weighed approximately 7 pounds soaking wet. Nobody planned it, nobody trained it. It just happened, and once it happened there was no going back. It started with breakfast. Theo had recently been introduced to solid foods, small soft pieces of banana, little puffs of rice cereal, the occasional cube of sweet potato that he regarded with deep philosophical uncertainty before deciding to throw it on the floor. Throwing things on the floor, it turned out, was Theo's greatest skill and his greatest joy, and Pushkin had noticed. The first morning it happened, a small piece of banana sailed off the high chair tray and landed on the kitchen tile with a soft pat. The room was quiet. And then, from around the corner of the refrigerator, moving with the focused energy of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment, Pushkin appeared. He hadn't been in the kitchen 30 seconds ago. Nobody had seen him come in. He was simply there, eyes on the banana. Completely unbothered by how suspicious his timing looked, he sniffed it, decided it was beneath him, walked away, but he came back the next morning, and the morning after that. Every time something left Theo's tray, Pushkin materialized, appearing from hallways, from under chairs, from rooms that were definitely on the other side of the house. James started calling it the food alarm. Emma started calling it slightly terrifying. Carol just started making extra banana. The real shift happened the day Theo took his first steps. It had been building for weeks, the pulling himself up on furniture, the tentative bouncing, the way he'd look across a room like he was calculating a very serious distance problem and wasn't sure he had enough data yet. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Theo let go of the coffee table, stood there a moment, arms out, expression completely focused, unwalked, 3 whole steps, into the middle of the living room. Emma gasped. Carol grabbed James's arm. James said something that probably shouldn't be repeated in polite company but was entirely understandable given the circumstances. And Pushkin was already moving. By the time Theo completed his 3rd step and wobbled to a stop, Pushkin had crossed the entire living room and positioned himself approximately 12 inches in front of the baby. Not touching, not interfering, just there, present. Watching Theo's face with those enormous pale eyes like he was personally responsible for this milestone going well. Theo looked down at him. Pushkin looked up at Theo. Theo took one more step, directly toward Pushkin, and sat down hard on the floor, the way babies do, with complete commitment and zero regret. Pushkin didn't move, didn't flinch, just sat there while Theo grabbed a fistful of his extraordinary fur and used it to pull himself back upright. Any other cat would have been gone. Any other cat would have made its feelings about that extremely clear. Pushkin just let it happen. Emma was crying by this point. She'll tell you she wasn't, but she was. Once Theo was mobile, the dynamic between them shifted into something harder to describe. They played together, genuinely played, not in the careful, supervised way you might expect, but in the loose, improvised, slightly chaotic way that children play when they've found someone on exactly their wavelength. Hide and seek became a daily ritual. Theo would hide, behind the curtain, under the coffee table, in the laundry basket with the lid not quite closed, and Pushkin would search. Now, Pallas's cats are ambush predators, patient, methodical. They do not rush, they do not guess, they commit. Which made it all the more remarkable when Pushkin, having tracked Theo carefully through the living room, around the couch, behind the armchair, crouched behind the curtain to wait for the perfect moment, and sneezed, loudly. Theo burst into giggles from behind the laundry basket. Found immediately. Pushkin stepped out from behind the curtain with the expression of a creature who had absolutely not just done that and would not be discussing it further. James had been watching from the hallway. He leaned against the wall and laughed until his eyes watered. Then came the dancing incident. Carol had music on in the kitchen one afternoon, something old, something with a good rhythm, and Theo, standing in the middle of the living room floor, began to do what babies do when they hear music they like. He bounced, he waved his arms. He turned in a slow, unsteady circle with the pure physical joy of someone who has just discovered that their body can move like this, and it is the greatest thing that has ever happened. Pushkin watched from the couch. His head moved, slightly, following the rhythm. Left, right, left, right. Then one ear tilted forward. Then, and the family still talks about this, Pushkin stood up on the couch cushion, shifted his weight from one front paw to the other, and began, with complete seriousness, swaying. It lasted approximately 4 seconds before he appeared to realize what he was doing, stopped, sat down, and began grooming his face with the focused intensity of an animal who had not just been caught dancing and would like everyone to move on. Emma got maybe 2 seconds of it on video. Those 2 seconds have been watched, at last count, over 1,000,000 times, but not everything was funny. One afternoon, Theo toddled into the living room carrying his favorite toy, a small stuffed elephant named, with the creative genius only a baby can bring, Ellie. He set Ellie down on the floor, turned to grab a book off the shelf, and turned back. Ellie was gone. Theo looked left, looked right. His face went through several stages of confusion before settling, slowly, into the specific expression of a child who is about to have feelings about this. Pushkin was on the couch, with Ellie, holding her down with one paw in the way that cats hold things they have decided belong to them now. End of discussion, no further questions. Theo walked over, reached for Ellie. Pushkin's paw pressed down slightly, not aggressive, just firm. Mine. Theo tried again. Same result. Theo looked at his mother. Emma looked at Pushkin. Pushkin looked at neither of them and stared peacefully at the middle distance. It took a stuffed fish, 2 cat treats, and James physically creating a distraction on the other side of the room before Ellie was successfully recovered. Pushkin accepted the fish. He did not apologize. He was seen, later that evening, sleeping with his chin resting on the spot where Ellie had been. Emma started paying closer attention after that, not to the funny moments. There were always funny moments, but to the quieter ones, the way Pushkin positioned himself at the bottom of the stairs every time Theo got near them. The way he'd appear in the doorway of whatever room Theo was in, check, and then settle just outside, not hovering, just aware. She mentioned it to Carol one evening after Theo had gone to bed. It's like he thinks it's his job, Emma said. Carol looked toward the hallway, where Pushkin was sitting outside Theo's door in the dark, perfectly still. Maybe it is, she said, and then one morning Emma came downstairs early, before James, before Carol, before anyone else was awake. She found Pushkin in the kitchen, not sitting, not waiting for food, doing something that made her stop in the doorway and stare. Something she couldn't explain, something that meant, from that morning forward, the family started looking at Pushkin a little differently. There's a thing that happens with animals, if you're paying attention, a slow, quiet shift, so gradual you almost don't notice it, where the house stops being your house and starts being theirs, where the furniture gets reorganized according to logic you don't fully understand, where the daily schedule begins, somehow, to revolve around a creature that weighs less than a bag of potting soil. The Miller family had been warned about this. They had not listened, and now it was too late. It began with the chair. The big armchair in the corner of the living room, the one James had owned for 11 years, the one with the perfect angle to the television and the exact right depth for an evening with a book, had always been his, past tense. One Thursday afternoon, Pushkin climbed into it, turned 3 times, settled into the center cushion with a heaviness that suggested he had been waiting his entire life for this specific piece of furniture, and went to sleep. James stood in the doorway with his coffee mug and looked at the chair. Pushkin did not look back. James sat on the couch. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself this for 9 consecutive days before quietly accepting that the armchair was no longer his, and that this was simply how things were now. Carol thought this was very funny. Right up until Pushkin claimed her reading spot on the window seat. After that, nobody thought it was funny. Biscuit, the yellow lab, had lived in this house for 6 years. He was a good dog, an easygoing dog. The kind of dog who got along with everyone and asked very little of the world beyond regular meals, the occasional walk, and a warm place to sleep. Biscuit had also, until recently, had a favorite spot on the living room rug, a faded oval near the radiator where the warmth settled just right on cold Montana mornings. He no longer had this spot. He had not given it up willingly. What had happened was this. One morning, Biscuit came in from outside, shook the cold off his coat, walked to his spot, and found Pushkin already there, sitting upright, perfectly centered, eyes forward. Biscuit stopped. Pushkin did not move. Biscuit took one step closer. Pushkin slowly turned his head and looked at Biscuit with an expression so flat, so ancient, so completely devoid of concern that Biscuit, 60 pounds of friendly Labrador who had never backed down from anything in his life, simply turned around and went to lie down somewhere else. He didn't even try again. James watched the whole thing from his spot on the couch, his former spot on the couch. He looked at Biscuit. He looked at Pushkin. "I understand, buddy," he said quietly. Biscuit sighed. The refrigerator discovery happened on a Wednesday. It was Carol who first noticed Pushkin sitting in front of the refrigerator, not the food bowl, not the treat cupboard, but the actual refrigerator itself, staring at it with the concentrated attention of someone working through a difficult equation. She watched him for a moment, then went back to what she was doing. An hour later he was still there. That evening James opened the refrigerator to get the milk. The seal broke with its familiar soft thunk, the light came on, the cool air drifted out, and Pushkin was on his feet instantly, craning his neck to see inside with the intensity of a naturalist who has just discovered a previously unknown ecosystem. James closed the refrigerator. Pushkin sat back down in front of it. By the end of the week, Pushkin had developed a complete theory about the refrigerator. The theory appeared to be that the refrigerator was some kind of food oracle, that sounds and proximity could influence what emerged from it, because he began sitting in front of it at regular intervals throughout the day, and simply waiting. Occasionally he would reach out one paw and tap the door gently, like he was knocking. James started narrating this to Carol in the voice of a nature documentary. The Pallas's cat approaches the food oracle. He has come to make his offering. He waits. He is patient. He has done this 14 times today. Carol told him to stop. She was also laughing when she said it. In an attempt to give Pushkin somewhere comfortable that was actually his, the family ordered a cat bed, a good one, orthopedic foam, soft exterior, chosen specifically for a cat of Pushkin's particular fluffiness and apparent need for comfort. It arrived on a Friday. Carol set it up in the corner of the living room with a small blanket inside, in what she felt was an appealing arrangement. Pushkin approached it, sniffed it, walked around it once, sniffed it again, walked away, sat down in a cardboard shipping box that had been left near the door, waiting to go out to the recycling. He stayed in that box for the rest of the afternoon and the evening, and he was in it again the next morning. The expensive cat bed sat untouched in the corner for 2 weeks before Carol donated it to the local animal shelter, where she was told it was immediately claimed by a very grateful senior tabby who, unlike Pushkin, had the basic decency to appreciate nice things. The cardboard box stayed. It was understood by everyone that the cardboard box stayed. The video calls started becoming an issue in March. James worked remotely 2 days a week, calls with partners, occasional presentations, the standard professional obligations of a man who was trying very hard to be taken seriously by people who could not see his living room. Pushkin found the laptop. The first time it happened, James was mid-sentence in a project meeting when Pushkin stepped directly onto the keyboard, walked the full length of it, and sat down in front of the camera, centered, composed, taking up the entire frame. There was a pause on the call. Then someone said, "Is that? What kind of cat is that?" And the meeting, for all practical purposes, was over. 12 minutes were spent discussing Pallas's cats. James didn't mind as much as he probably should have. The second time, Pushkin sat down in front of the camera and simply stared into it, unblinking, flat-faced, magnificently unimpressed, while James tried to continue talking around him. His colleagues began requesting that Pushkin be present on calls. One of them changed her video background to a photo of him. James drew a boundary after the third incident. Pushkin ignored the boundary. The calls continued to feature Pushkin, and then there were the socks. Nobody noticed at first. A missing sock here, a missing sock there, the normal entropy of a busy household. It wasn't until Carol was doing laundry one afternoon and pulled the couch away from the wall that she found them. 11 socks, all from the left foot, arranged in no pattern that made any human sense whatsoever, pushed into the gap between the couch and the baseboard like a very specific and deliberate collection. She called James in. They stood and looked at the socks. "He's been taking them," Carol said. "For how long?" James said. They counted back. The missing socks went back at least 6 weeks. They never did figure out the logic of it. Why only left socks? Why behind the couch? Why that particular location? Pushkin, when confronted with the evidence, looked at the sock collection, looked at Carol, and walked away with the air of someone who does not discuss their artistic process with critics. The sock situation was quietly accepted, and the family began buying socks in bulk. By this point, something had become undeniable. This house, this family, this schedule, this furniture, this food oracle refrigerator and cardboard box and video call roster, all of it had been quietly, completely, and without any formal announcement reorganized around one 7-pound Pallas's cat who had arrived as a tiny rescued kitten and somehow ended up running the entire operation. James said it out loud one evening, sitting on his former armchair, now the couch, looking around the living room. "He owns this house," he said, not bitterly, almost with admiration. "He just owns it." Carol looked up from her book. "Did you just figure that out?" she said. And then, on a quiet Thursday morning in April, everything changed again. Emma came downstairs to find Carol standing very still in the hallway outside the back room. "What's wrong?" Emma said. Carol turned around. Her expression was somewhere between disbelief and something that might have been joy. "Come look," she said. Emma followed her to the doorway of the back room, the small warm room where Pushkin had claimed his cardboard box, and looked inside. Pushkin was in the box. He was not alone. Curled against him, eyes still closed, were 4 of the smallest, roundest, most impossibly fluffy creatures Emma had ever seen in her life. 4 kittens, each one approximately the size of a tangerine. Each one already wearing the signature Pallas's cat expression, flat-faced, wide-eyed, deeply serious about everything. Emma put her hand over her mouth. Carol put her arm around Emma's shoulder. From behind them, James appeared, took one look and said, in a voice very much like a man watching his entire life reorganize itself in real time, "There's 4 of them." Pushkin looked up from the box, looked at all 3 of them standing in the doorway, and slowly, with great dignity, looked back down at his kittens. The message was clear. This was no longer a family with a cat. This was a cat with a family. And now, apparently, there were reinforcements. There is a moment, every parent knows it, every pet owner knows it, when you look around at your life and realize it has become something you never planned for. Not in a bad way. In the way that makes you stand very still in the middle of your own kitchen and think, how did I get here, and would I change a single thing? James Miller had that moment on a Tuesday morning in May. He was standing in the hallway in his socks, one of the few remaining matched pairs, holding a cup of coffee that was getting cold, watching 4 Pallas's kittens attempt to destroy his shoelaces with the unified focus of a military operation. He did not move, he did not rescue the shoelaces. He just stood there, coffee cooling, and watched, and smiled. The kittens had been named by committee. Theo, who was now 14 months old and had opinions about everything, had contributed enthusiastically to this process, pointing at each kitten and producing sounds that the family interpreted generously as names. Carol wrote them down. James suggested they were perhaps not traditional names. Carol pointed out that Pushkin was not a traditional name either, and yet here they were. The kittens became Pip, Mossball, Duke, and Theo's personal contribution, delivered with great conviction and zero ambiguity, Boo. Pushkin regarded all 4 of them with the expression of a creature who had not fully thought through the consequences of this situation and was now managing them with what dignity remained available. The shoelace incident was only the beginning. From the moment the kittens became mobile, which happened faster than anyone expected, because Pallas's kittens apparently arrive with a specific agenda and very little patience, the house entered a new phase of existence that the family would later refer to simply as the weeks. Pip discovered James's shoelaces on a Monday. By Wednesday, all 4 kittens had discovered them. James began wearing slip-on shoes indoors. He did not admit this was why. Duke found the laundry basket on Thursday. What followed was a sequence of events that Carol filmed in its entirety because she understood immediately that she was watching something that needed to be documented. Duke climbed in, explored, was apparently satisfied with the laundry basket as a location, settled down inside it among a collection of clean dish towels. Then the basket tipped. Slowly at first, a gentle lean, a moment of uncertainty, and then all at once, the basket rolled onto its side and Duke was deposited onto the laundry room floor inside a small fortress of dish towels, blinking at the ceiling with the expression of someone reassessing several recent decisions. He did not immediately get up. He appeared to be waiting to see if the situation would resolve itself. It did not. Carol set the basket upright. Duke climbed back in. The basket tipped again. This happened 4 times before Carol removed the basket entirely, and Duke was left standing in the middle of the laundry room looking at the empty space where his adventure had been. The feather happened on a Friday afternoon. Carol had been using a feather wand to give the kittens some exercise, a few minutes of chasing, a little jumping, the kind of structured activity that was supposed to tire them out. It did not tire them out. What it did was introduce all 4 kittens simultaneously to the concept of the feather, at which point any idea of structure dissolved completely, and the living room became something that can only be described as organized chaos with fur. Pip went left. Duke went right. Mossball launched herself directly upward with an optimism that slightly exceeded her current athletic ability. Boo, smallest of the 4, most serious of expression, watched the other 3 for approximately 2 seconds, calculated something, and then charged straight down the middle at full speed. They collided in the center of the rug. A small heap of kittens sorted itself out, reassembled, and immediately began again. Pushkin watched from the armchair, his armchair, the one that used to be James's, with the expression of a senior employee watching the new interns on their first day, patient, slightly pained. Aware that this was going to be a long season, Biscuit had retreated to the hallway. James and Carol stood in the doorway of the living room watching the feather session escalate and didn't say anything for a long moment. "We need a bigger couch," James finally said. Carol nodded slowly. "We need a bigger house." Then came the stairs. The kittens discovered the staircase on a Saturday morning, and the family, who had been expecting this and had not sufficiently prepared, watched it unfold from the living room with the helpless fascination of people watching weather develop. Pip went first, 1 step up, cautious, testing, then 2, then 3, then turned around to look down and made a sound that suggested the distance back to the floor was not what he had been expecting. Duke arrived at the bottom of the stairs, assessed the situation, and went up faster than Pip, passing him on the 3rd step, reaching the 5th step, and then freezing completely. Mossball arrived, looked at both of them, and began climbing with the confidence of someone who had a plan. She made it to the 7th step, the highest any of them had reached, before sitting down abruptly and beginning to groom her face, as if this had been the destination all along. Boo sat at the bottom and watched all 3 of them for a long moment. Then Boo walked away. Came back 30 seconds later with more speed, charged up the stairs past all 3 siblings, reached the landing at the top, skidded on the hallway runner, disappeared around the corner, and was not seen for several minutes. When Boo reappeared, it was at the top of the stairs, looking down at the others with an expression of pure satisfaction. James started up to retrieve the situation, met Pushkin coming down. Pushkin passed him on the stairs without acknowledgement, descended to the bottom, sat down, and looked up at the 4 kittens now scattered at various points of the staircase like a very fluffy, very confused installation. Something passed between Pushkin and the kittens, some frequency of communication not available to humans, because one by one, slowly, with varying degrees of grace, all 4 of them made their way back down. Pip tumbled the last 2 steps. Pushkin pretended not to notice. That evening, after dinner, after the kittens had been fed and the dishes were done, and the house had settled into its particular quiet, Emma went to check on Theo. She found him in the corner of the living room, on the big floor cushion they'd put down for exactly this kind of moment, the soft landing spot, the gentle place. He was asleep, curled on his side, one arm stretched out, fist loosely closed. And tucked against him, all 4 of them, in a pile of extraordinary fluff, were Pip, Mossball, Duke, and Boo. Boo had found the crook of Theo's elbow and was pressed into it like that was where Boo had always been meant to be. And at the edge of the cushion, upright, eyes moving slowly around the room, watching the windows, the doorway, the shadows, was Pushkin, not asleep, watching. Emma stood in the doorway for a long moment and didn't say anything, didn't take a photo, didn't reach for her phone, just watched. Later she tried to explain it to Carol. "It wasn't funny," she said. "I mean, the kittens, the stairs, all of it, that's all funny. But that moment, Theo and all of them together, and Pushkin just sitting there." She stopped. Carol waited. "It felt like something," Emma said. "Like something that was supposed to happen. Like the whole thing. Pushkin arriving, the way he attached to Theo, like it was all building to that room, that cushion, that moment." Carol was quiet for a while. "I think," she said finally, "that some things just find each other. Animals, people, I don't know how, I don't think it matters how." She looked toward the living room. "It just matters that they did." By June, the Miller house had been fully and officially reorganized. The armchair, James's former armchair, now belonged to Pushkin, and on any given afternoon you might find 1 or 2 kittens piled on top of him there, or nearby, or scattered across the rug in the boneless sprawl that kittens achieve when fully, completely at rest. The cardboard box in the back room had been replaced by a larger cardboard box, sourced specifically for this purpose. Biscuit had negotiated a new spot near the radiator, a smaller oval, slightly to the left of his original position, ceded to him by the kittens in what appeared to be a diplomatic arrangement. The refrigerator remained Pushkin's oracle. He visited it daily. It had not yet yielded its secrets, but he remained committed to the investigation. The sock collection had grown. Nobody discussed this. And every morning, without fail, Theo would wake up and make his way to the living room, steadier on his feet now, more confident, the walk of a small person who knows where he belongs, and Pushkin would be there, waiting, as he always was, not because anyone had taught him to be, not because anyone had asked, because some things just find each other, and when they do, they hold on. James wrote something down one evening in the small notebook he kept on the kitchen counter, the one Carol used for grocery lists and he used for thoughts that didn't have anywhere else to go. He wrote, "We thought we rescued one Pallas's cat. Turned out he was just the beginning. Turns out, and I don't know how else to say this, they rescued us right back. The house isn't clean, the chair isn't mine. There are socks missing and a cardboard box in the back room, and 4 kittens on the stairs at 7 in the morning. I wouldn't change one single thing." He closed the notebook. From the living room came the sound of the feather wand, and 4 small sets of paws on the hardwood, and Theo's laugh rising above all of it, bright and clear and completely delighted. Pushkin's ears turned toward the sound. Then he settled back into the armchair, tucked his paws beneath him, and closed his eyes. His house, his family, his chaos, all exactly as it should be.